Hello creators, how are you guys? Great to see you again and hang out with you for another Video Creators Podcast episode. I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you guys today because there's a lot of people who get really excited about all the success that they can hopefully get on YouTube. It's their dream to get lots of fame and money and popularity, and for others it's just like, hey, I just want to grow my business. I don't really care about the fame part. There's a lot of different goals behind YouTube, but when your channel really starts growing and doing well and performing the way that you always dreamed it would, there comes like this whole, I'll call it a mess of other things that kind of like go hand in hand, and it's what you get on the other side of success on YouTube isn't always what we dreamed or thought it could be. And so we're going to have a really good conversation here today about that, kind of the dark side of YouTube and the mental health stuff and the poor choices that creators can also often make and the PR crises that can lead to, and just the downright like scalability of doing this so that we don't burn out and just quit. And now we're no longer serving value to our audience, nor to ourselves and to the people who depend on us. So it's going to be a really good conversation. And I want to have it with a friend of mine, Matthew Tabor from the podcast, The Create Unknown, also from the YouTube channel Vsauce. So great to have you, Matthew. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I've been watching your videos for over 2 years now.
Oh,
over
cool.
2 years
Thank
now.
you.
And I finally get to talk to you. I've tried in the past.
Yeah. So before we went live, he was telling me I tried to, but it didn't work out. I felt like, oh no, it's like going to be one of those stories where I was about to get on stage and someone really had a question about getting their account access back on YouTube or something I can't do anything about. I don't know. What's the story? You haven't told me yet.
Yeah, so it was at CVX Live in 2017, which is a pretty awesome YouTube event conference kind of thing in Utah. And I'd started watching your videos a little bit before that because I was hosting a panel there with Collins Key, King of Random, Peter Hollins, Brooklyn and Bailey, and I was looking through the schedules and I was like, oh, this guy's talks are the ones that I would want to go to if I didn't have a conflict on it, right? So I'm like, oh, I can definitely find him and wrangle him into a conversation at some point if I hang around like the backstage area long enough, right? I couldn't do that because every single time I saw you, there was a swarm of people trying to get it. It was it was amazing. So it was like the weird little version of like Beatlemania, and you were at the center of it. Everybody wanted to know what you thought about this or that. It's like, well, I can see why I wanted to talk to him. It looks like everybody wants to talk to him. So I'm glad we're finally doing it.
Now we can do it outside of one of those events because, those events get kind of crazy, especially in the creator circle, in green rooms and things like that. So I'm glad we get to connect now. And I'm looking forward to learning from you because this is something I want to talk with you about because I know you've seen this probably maybe even more so than I have. It's not uncommon for my clients. In fact, you just mentioned a creator. I won't point them out by name, but we obviously both know this person. They had about 6 million subs at the time, and it was a few years ago, and they came to me and they said, Tim, either you're going to help me figure out how to scale this thing and grow this thing, or I'm going to quit. They're like, I'm working 60 hours a week. I have a few kids. I never get to see my wife. And she's kind of like done with all this, and I'm making good money. And for most people, like this looks really successful, but I cannot keep this up. And I've tried all the scaling stuff, but like I just can't get it down. And so I worked with this creator for off and on for a few months. And today they have well over 10 million subs, and they have about 13 people working for them on their channel. And he's like, Tim, I show up, and instead of working 60 hours a week, I'm working like a few hours a week. Now, I know this guy. He's not working a few hours a week. But on his channel, like he shows up, he shoots the videos, and then other people take over from there. Yeah. And that's That's like, that is the way this should happen, guys. Not with the alternative, which is where he was. And I know it looks like once you get a lot of fame that you just got some money and all your problems are solved. Absolutely not true. You just exchange one set of issues for another set of issues. And you have any stories that you've seen with the creators that you're working with, Matthew?
Oh boy, almost all of them. And that's really not an exaggeration. Everybody has some version of this story. And we get that a lot when we interview creators on the Create Unknown, because everybody started somewhere. Okay, so everybody started with 0 views and 0 subs.
That's right.
And so even if it went quickly or it was a long grind, they got to where they wanted to be and thought, I have a couple problems that I never saw coming, and that I wasn't prepared to deal with those problems. And so it completely depends on the person. It depends on the type of channel, whether it's a high volume video thing or you release this magnum opus every month. It doesn't matter. Everybody's got some problems that kind of, they manifest along with the success, and figuring out what those are, trying to head them off before they start. But dealing with them effectively. So like the story you just told, you can get back to doing what you're really, really good at and doing what you like.
That's right. Yeah. And today we want to focus on some of the stress side of what that produces, but there's a lot more conversations, guys, that we will be having over the course of this year regarding the social pressures and expectations and relationships and team building and scalability. All that stuff is so important. So before we dive into this, though, two things real quick. Number one, you guys who are watching the live stream of this podcast recording, in the chat, Laura, my producer, is in there. And guys, please ask your questions. We want to make sure we have a good amount of time at the end of this to really dive into your questions and help you guys with where you're at, which I know is going to help a lot of other people who are in a similar position maybe as you are. So ask your questions in the chat. Laura will take them and put them in front of us. And at the end here, we will do our best to go through as many of them as possible. Second of all, though, the reason that Matthew is here is that this is like exactly the type of thing he talks about a lot over on his podcast called The Create Unknown. Clever title, by the way. I like it.
Thank you.
And you guys can check it out, youtube.com/thecreateunknown, or go to thecreateunknown.com. And there's links in the show notes and descriptions and stuff. You guys can find all that stuff there. But tell us a little bit about your podcast there and how you address some of these topics, and then we'll dive into talking about some of these things.
Okay, so I work with Kevin Lieber of Vsauce 2, and if you guys aren't familiar with the Vsauce channels, they're a series of science, technology, math channels that they've done a great job over the last 7 or 8 years. Michael Stevens with Vsauce 1 is just shockingly good at explaining really complex concepts in a way that even if you get a little lost, you just kind of listen with your jaw dropped, just loving what you're hearing, right? And then you can come back to it. Kevin on Vsauce 2, he focuses a little more on the human experience. Lately, he's been dealing with math and game theory and how that applies to just different little situations in life. It's very cool. Jake Roper's on Vsauce 3. He has a more cinematic approach. He just released a video with YouTube Originals or YouTube Premium rather, that is called Could You Survive the Movies, or Can You Survive the Movies, where he goes for about 25 minutes into the science of the most recent Mad Max movie. It's epically shot and edited. It's fantastic. It's amazing. All these guys are amazing. So working with Kevin to develop content, we met a lot of creators over the years, and everybody had their own story. And some people were really excellent at specific parts. Some people struggled with other parts. And we thought, everybody could benefit from hearing what they do. And how they've solved the problems that they have. And so we got the idea to do the Create Unknown podcast, where we talk to these creators about what it's actually like to do what they do. And we have such a range of stories, from Destin from Smarter Every Day. He's got a certain approach. Justine, who's been around for as long as YouTube, really. She was the very first person to stream on Twitch back when it was still Justin TV. So they have their own approach. Each of the Vsauce guys is very different. We've talked to all of them. Kwebbelkop, who has just a crazy, fun gaming channel, he weighed in a couple weeks ago on developing a system for what really amounts to his business. And it's just fantastic to hear all of these people tell their stories, see how they do it differently, pull a little bit from each one, and kind of hear about the individual people and lives behind the channels that we like.
Yeah, you guys should definitely go check it out. And that episode you just mentioned, I really, really like that one. I got subscribed to the podcast, guys, and I think you should too, where it's all about exploring your, the dream job on YouTube and creating some of those people who have done it and hearing a little bit about behind the scenes of what goes on there, which we're going to talk about a little bit here. But that episode, it's like, yes, finally a YouTube creator who's like saying what we've like a lot of us have been saying for a long time, which is build a business model around your brand and do it in a way where like you're delivering the same value to them that people are subscribing to you for, right? And make it and then put systems in place that make it scalable. So like, finally someone who gets it. So if you guys need an episode to start with, that's the one I appreciated the most, but there's plenty there. You guys can go check it out. And regarding your comments, there's a lot of questions. We're going to answer the ones that are on topic here. And so those are the ones Laura will be putting in front of us. So other questions are great, but we're going to stick to the ones that have to do with the topic we're talking about here today. So Matthew, as you're working with all these creators and you're working on Vsauce's channel and things, you see a lot of the stuff happening behind the scenes. Why are YouTube creators just dealing with a lot of these mental health issues in the first place? What is it about being a creator that even lends us to needing to have some of these conversations?
Yeah, in general, I think they're overwhelmed. They do a whole lot of different things because you really have to. So if we think about YouTube creators as being entrepreneurs like any other business, right? They have an idea, they have a thing that they really like, they start doing it, and it builds and it builds. And there's no help, there's no staff. You're doing everything, and that can be that's shooting, that's editing, that's writing if you do something that requires a script. It's procuring all the little things you need for your video, whether it's props or whatever. You're staying on top of the tech to make your videos look great. You're doing social media. You're doing, it doesn't end.
The accounting, the email, the travel, videography. Yep, everything.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, if you start making a buck, even if it's a tiny little buck, you have this entirely new set of problems. Mm-hmm. You have all this new stuff to do. And then when you do get help and you expand to a point where you bring somebody on to do some of that, then all of a sudden you're in a management capacity. And you probably haven't been in that spot before. So not only is management really hard, being an executive is brutally difficult, but you're in a unique spot on YouTube because the thing that's at stake is your vision. It's your product. It's the thing that you have developed out of your personality in your mind for however many years. So you're extremely concerned about how that product is going to look when you start to hand over responsibilities a little bit. The stress of that is it's pretty unique, and it's extremely tough. So you've got to manage all that stress and somehow kind of miraculously make sure that your content is as good as it ever was and preferably gets even better.
What do you think is like the biggest thing that's actually creating this stress? Is it our own self expectations that we have, or do you feel like it's external expectations that we feel or perceive from our audience, or is it actual expectations? Where is the stress coming from, do you think?
I think with a lot of creators, which I hesitate on this because there are different tiers of creators, of course. If you've got a passion channel that has a few hundred subscribers, that's amazing. You've got your own set of problems. If you have an outfit that, like the 6 million to 10 million sub guy you talked about before, or like Of Vsauce, I think Michael has 14 million. Kevin's got 4 million subs. Jake's got around 4 as well. You've got a different set of problems, whether it's 400 or 14 million. But nobody is really prepared for this. That's a big part of the problem, is that when you start your channel, you start to grow, everything is going really well. Very few people have really done any of this in a professional capacity before. Okay. And we know that lots of YouTube creators are on the younger side. So they may not have 15 years of job experience to pull onto. Before I got into YouTube, my professional work was in written content online, mostly on the news side. And so I was sourcing stories, assigning them, editing those stories for publication, doing a little bit on the marketing side, whatever. The transition to YouTube wasn't a completely new world, because at the core, these things all kind of work the same way. So it was nice to be able to draw on that. If I'd started with the YouTube stuff when I was 17, for example, because there are a ton of shockingly good creators who are still in high school. Kwebbelkop was one of them. He started his channel when I think he was 17 or so, and he took off immediately. But you don't, when you're young, you don't always have any of that experience to draw on. So all of a sudden, you have to deal with those responsibilities we just listed, from editing to management and taxes and budgets and projections, huge marketing responsibilities. Well, you're at the mercy of whatever happens with YouTube, which usually trickles down and affects us all. Yeah. It's insane. And so it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're not completely prepared for that, partially prepared for that, and you don't have a team of people around you to pick up on the things that are tough for you.
I think that there's absolutely a lot going on, like to our point. I remember being that solopreneur guy who was doing it all by himself and stressed out. And I remember that feeling like I have a plate spinning on every finger and every toe. And there's absolutely nowhere else, no other way I could possibly take on anything. But I had to keep all those plates spinning, because if one fell, like, that was a loss of income from me. And all 10 of them just barely equaled enough for me to survive, right? So so the stress for me, I think, at that point was somewhat financial, but it was also somewhat about, like, the amount of work I was doing. And it was also about, like, if this fails, like, there's, like, I got nothing, So, like, there's that pressure. And I remember that very distinctly. Two things made a big difference for me. One is I read a book called The Pumpkin Plan. And what he does in that book is, like, the way you grow a prize-winning pumpkin is you take have you read this book?
Yeah, I know this about focusing on the gigantic pumpkin, right?
Yeah, if you want to grow a pumpkin that's the size of a truck, you don't like you start with a prize-winning seed / idea, and then you plant it in good soil, and then you water it, you nurture it, and then as it grows, you have to cut off all the other pumpkins from the vine in order to get all the nutrients to the big pumpkin. And he describes all those other pumpkins. I love this; it's really helpful for me at the time, which is you need to cut off all of the distractions that are disguised as opportunities. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And at that time, I was, like, working with different clients. I was managing different people's YouTube channels, and I was doing this. I was all over the place, and I felt like I needed to do it all. But what I changed as a result of that is, like, okay, what is my pumpkin? What's, like, the thing that I want to be the best in the world at, and just focus on that thing. And so I actually let a lot of those quote unquote plates just drop. And I gave up about 2/3 of our income for a few months, which was not a sustainable level for us. But I was like, I can't go anywhere from here. I'm trapped. I'm stuck. I cannot grow and produce anything more if I don't say no to some of these other things. And so I fired some clients and stuff. And so it was rough for a few months, but without having done that, I would not have been able to grow past that point and get to where I am today. And even now today, I'm bumping into some of those same things again on a different level. But I think it's really important that we as creators know exactly this is what we want. This is what I'm trying to accomplish, and just stay like laser focused with pig-headed determination and diligence. Like, this is it, and saying no to those other things, and having a plan for getting there. Because otherwise the shiny object syndrome becomes pretty real pretty fast. At least it did for me. I think people in the chat are, Melissa Bevins, she says, like, for me, the most frustrating thing is understanding why one video does well and a similar video might be a dud, and there's other people getting stressed out over, I wish I was doing better, but I went into this with a 5-year mindset, not 3 months. Is what Rosh says. And a lot of people in the chat now kind of sharing what's stressed out, making them stressed out. Just like, hey, I care about this a lot, but no one else seems to care about it. That's stressing people out as well. So a lot of different reasons, but sorry, I went a little rant there.
Hey, that's okay.
But so anything else that you feel is like creating these mental health issues with creators?
Yeah, so I was talking to Kevin from Vsauce too. He's the co-host on the Create Unknown podcast. I was talking to him about it this morning or last night, saying, hey, is there anything I'm forgetting here? And I run kind of everything like this by him because he is that creator, So I am not the guy on camera. I've never been the guy on camera. I support the creators in different roles. Okay. So he's going to have a very different perspective than I do. And he said, I was making the point that we've got a classic entrepreneurial problem here where you're spinning all those plates. You're doing all the things that just wear you down, and one person can only do so much. And over time, this affects you and it affects your channel. He said, yeah, that's right. But there is a unique element to this on YouTube because you are the product. People are seeing you and responding to you in real time. It can be highly critical when you're not doing things at 100%. Then you as the product, it's not going to be 100%, and you know this. And there's a lot of anxiety that comes from that, and there's a lot of pressure that comes from being that product. If you had a restaurant, you don't find out from every customer how every single bite of the burger tastes, right? You might have a general idea of whether they like it or not if they come back. But when you make a video, every second of that video is getting analyzed. And that feedback is coming because they're looking at you and then they're talking directly to you. So that can be an amazing thing. You can find out some excellent, useful information from that. Sometimes it can be really tough. Yeah. And it's tough when people are mean and things like that, of course. But it's also tough when you realize something from that feedback that you need to do and you're not in a position to do it. Maybe you need to up your video quality. That game's got to go higher, but you don't have the money to improve on the equipment you've got. That's really frustrating and hard. That's not a slam on you personally as a creator. It's a reality of what you're producing. And so admitting that, oh boy, that's valid criticism that I'm not in a position to do, that's its own type of anxiety. So you have all of these things working at the same time. That stuff is unique. That's unique to video creators. That's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially since we're putting ourselves out there so personally and vulnerably often, whenever the criticism does come, it's like, it hurts. And it's almost just as bad as you put something out there and no one watches. And then it's like, it's not, and it's something that like you care about, but it's almost like you went to a party and you're like, everyone, I'm here or whatever. I'm not that sure you do that, but you get the idea. And no one talks to you and you just end up standing alone in the corner by yourself. And you're like, I don't know why, like what's wrong with me? And especially if your self-identity and self-worth is tied to this and you start taking it personally as like a form of rejection or something, that can have lots of issues that we won't get into today necessarily, but yeah, you're so right. So I listening to your podcast, one of the things I've heard you say is like, this isn't really unique to just creators though. This is like something that is kind of on a bigger level than that, and creators just don't see it. How do you think we should be thinking about this and addressing this?
It's really helpful if you have a YouTube channel. If you're a creator, you think of you and the channel as two separate things. Now, obviously, the channel is you in a very real way, and we know this. What goes into really putting everything into a channel? It's people are always saying it's my baby, it's this and that. In a way, that's absolutely true. At the same time, if you and your channel have a 100% shared identity, then anything that's going on with your channel is going to pretty much go on with you. It's going to be very real when there's criticism, when there's something difficult, a difficult situation with your channel, whether it's a money thing or these plans that you've got fall through, the video series that you've built up just doesn't end up happening, or like you said, you put a ton of effort into this one thing and the community doesn't love it, then you have to absorb all of that as a person, right? And so thinking about a channel as being a little bit of a separate entity, it doesn't sound like much, but making that distinction is tremendously helpful with processing all of these problems, because then you've got your life on one side, you have the channel's life on the other. And they obviously have a relationship, but making it so they aren't the exact same thing, that's pretty important.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's hard to do that, especially when you're putting yourself personally into it, like you said. But
yeah.
One of the things I love that you said too is like, creators, yes, need to separate themselves, but on your podcast, you talk about like how we actually need to also see ourselves as entrepreneurs. And if we think about ourselves in that category, that has makes a big difference also on how we approach some of these issues. Tell us a little bit about that. If we shift think more about it as ourselves as entrepreneurs versus creator, what impact does that have?
Okay. Well, when you have the two identities wedded together, then if you have a problem, it's kind of a you problem, right? Where you don't quite know how to solve it because all of these things about you and your unique situation factor in. If the channel is on its own, if the channel has a life of its own, then it's really easy to isolate what the problem is. You can say, well, it's time for me to get editing help. I'm just overwhelmed with editing. The channel needs somebody who can edit for it. Well, then there are a million resources that are out there to help you take that step, okay? Whether it's a million business books and websites to guys like Gary Vaynerchuk, his daily podcasts, they touch on stuff like delegating, management, expanding, how you hire the right people, how you got to fire sometimes, all of this. They give you all of these tools to deal with whatever that problem is. And that's a very different thing than the problem being, I'm 25, I'm married, we just had a baby, I need to make this much money a month so that I can continue doing this. I have X amount of hours a week. I really don't want to take away too much energy and attention from my actual job. And then I need a video editor. Well, anybody who hears that whole situation, they look at it and they're like, okay, we have a lot to unpack here. So it's a completely different thing when you're the one who's very tightly wound into the problem versus when your channel or your business just happens to have a problem. One of these is a whole lot easier to solve and to get help for.
Yeah, I think the way you guys should start thinking about this is like, what are the systems I need to put in place that reproduce the results that I want to get? And that's the difference between how an entrepreneur or business owner thinks versus an employee. An employee thinks like, all right, I'm going to work hard and then I should get a paycheck. And that's the way a lot of creators are, like, hey, I worked really hard on this video or on these videos. YouTube owes me a paycheck. And you're like, actually, they don't. They don't owe you anything.
It doesn't quite work that way.
They don't they're not even required to have a partner program at all, actually, But the way an entrepreneur or a small business owner thinks is like they're not exchanging time for dollars, they're exchanging value for dollars. And that is, how do I put systems in place that scale the value that I want to provide and the way I capture value in return, right? So it's not just about how do I give more output, but it's also how do I provide good value? This is what a definition of a business model is the rationale for how one creates, delivers, and captures value. So most creators are really good at the creating and delivering value side. They stop at the capture value side, and that's where it falls short. And that's the difference between having a business model or having an employee mindset. And so one of your guests on your podcast mentioned a book called E-Myth, which is absolutely the book all of you guys should be reading, because I know like the creator I worked with in the beginning of this episode, the story. He was like, I've tried having video editors before, but none of them can do it the way I do it, and it's just not worth it. And I understand that, because it's like, that's our baby. But really the problem isn't like that no one else can edit the way that you can edit. In fact, if you hire the right person, they're going to make it better than you would have done it, right?
Right.
But the problem
you're so rarely the best at every one of these elements. You might be really good at all of them, but you get somebody who is the best.
Yeah.
And then things just get that much better. So no, you're totally right about that.
And you can create the best and even better by actually just putting systems in place that they can follow. This guy, for example, now I talked to him last year in an event. He's like, Tim, my process for editing a video is now 70 pages long. And he's like, but it's all checkboxes. And he's like, it's at the point now that I can give this checklist to anyone with my raw footage who understands the mechanics of editing. He's like, and if I follow the checklist, I'll get a video back that's 100% every single time. And
that's awesome.
Like, that's the way you got to be thinking about this. Like you go to McDonald's, they know exactly how long you put the burger in the microwave, I presume, and then when you need to take it out and how many seconds the cheese needs to be in. Like, it's a systemized process. And you do, for the video editing example, you do have a process for how you edit your videos. You just haven't thought of it before. Like, why do you cut here and not there? Why are you using this music and not that music? Why do these two need to overlap or whatever? How many seconds can I go without showing one of my kids again if you're doing family stuff, right? So like that is all very reproducible, systematic stuff, but we just haven't identified it, and that's what's holding us back. And it creates a lot of stress. Is not in terms of not being able to scale it. Is not identifying and creating the systems, which is a ton of work. Absolutely, it is. But if you guys want to reduce the stress and make this sufficient or sustainable long term, I think that's what it takes.
Yeah, and what you just explained highlights this big conceptual difference between creating a job for yourself and creating a business or a system or a channel. Okay, these are night and day. And a lot of people, when they think about creating a business, they think it would be really cool to do this thing that I've thought about forever. I'm really excited about it, and then I will do that business, right? I myself will work in that capacity, and that's really cool. But that's creating a job for yourself. And when you start to succeed, you have a lot more to do. If you offer some kind of service, for example, people book that service, so you have a lot more work to do as well. And that's a different thing than building a business that functions even when you take a day off. Okay, there's something running, there's something happening when you're not there specifically working. Okay, that's a massive, massive difference. And that's the trap that so many creators get into, is that they've essentially created a job for themselves. And then for 100 different reasons that we talked about, and about 10,000 we didn't get to, that job becomes overwhelming. And it's perfectly sensible that it would. There's just no expectation that one person can do all of these things. And so when you think a little differently about it and think of it as a system, what you just described, then it's, how can I create this thing that executes my vision even when I am not the guy sitting at the computer doing it? Because it's not possible for me to do that every single day.
Yeah. Now, I know some of you guys in the chat are like, this is great, but I don't even have the capacity to work with anyone, right? So should I be thinking about systems? Yes. Because if you don't have systems, you can't work with anyone. So it's like writing it down, or even if it's just video editing, you just screen capture your video editing process for a few videos and just walk that person through. This is why I'm cutting here and not there, and send that 2 hour, 3 hour, whatever it is, screen capture a few of them to whoever you're going to end up working with, watch them and ask them to put it into a checklist. But I do think you need to be writing it down. In the beginning, your time is limited, especially if you have another full-time job or you're doing something else. Like, you just gotta, say no to all of the opportunities or distractions that are disguised as opportunities, and just stay focused on your prize-winning pumpkin. And then you can start to expand and grow as you gain more capacity at that point and more resources and such. What are some things that creators can do to manage their stress levels? And then we're going to start diving into your questions here. So if you guys have them, lingering ones, make sure you ask them now. Laura will get it in front of us. But how do they manage their stress levels? And then we'll talk about how do we turn this into a positive thing.
Yeah, managing the stress levels. First of all, it's asking for help when you're ready to get help. When you have a problem, ask around. Tim, you and I have both been to a bunch of events where we know what creators are like and how much they do for each other. Okay, and there are resources like this live stream and this chat. You got a bunch of people in chat here weighing in on some of the problems that other people in the chat have brought up. There are so many resources to get help with whatever weird problem you've got. That's the crazy thing. YouTube is so big and it's been around long enough that whatever problem you can dream up, there is no way that you are the first one to have that problem. Not in 2019. Some of the original people really had to pave the way, but it's not like that anymore. And you can get involved in whatever community you're in. Like the Vsauce channels are, they're in the science community. There are a million guys in the science community, and then a ton of really dedicated fans who love to offer their expertise on things. You can just flat out ask them on Twitter. Just say, hey, I've got this problem with my video, whatever it is. What do you think? You can get in touch with the creators who are similar to you. They can be big, they can be small. It makes no difference. There are people who can absolutely help you with whatever problem comes up. And that's a really big thing. And it goes back to what we were saying, like, you don't have to do it all yourself, and it's not practical for you to try. So the earlier you recognize that getting help matters and that those resources exist, getting in that groove of offering mutual support where sometimes you're helping, sometimes you're getting help. That's a pretty good way to move forward.
Where would you recommend people go to get help? Like if they're starting out, do you have any place you would send them to?
It depends on the problem, really. If it's a YouTube related problem, well, start getting in the community of somebody who really touches on YouTube problems. If it's something about community building, for example, there are a lot of great resources online where people are really hyper analyzing what it takes to build a community that really wants to be there. People who are active in the chats. I saw a couple weeks ago the episode with Powtoons. I was seeing the way people in your chat were talking about what they do, how the guest service could actually augment that, and they were helping each other. They're doing it here again. So this is one of those communities where you pop in and get some value out of it. And there are a lot of those depending on the substrain of the problem that your channel has. And if it's one of those entrepreneurial problems, you can start with podcasts like Gary V's. I mean, there's no shortage of great business and entrepreneurship podcasts. I'm not listing them off because there are 10,000 that are amazing. There are just so many. And so you can honestly Google it and get to a good place within 5 minutes. It's that available to you.
Yeah. And if some of these things are like, well, the way I did when I started out was I actually started bartering services because I didn't know anything about business. And so I found this lady who is a business coach, and she's trying to grow her YouTube channel. And it's like, hey, how about once a month we meet and I'll help you with your channel, and then once a month we meet and you help me with my business. And I don't know where I would be right now without that, but that was like very fundamental for me, just like getting started and getting my first product created and actually learning how to sell it in a way that's like not sleazy and is like offering value rather than just trying to extract value from people. And And so like maybe there's a bartering situation you could do where I get most of it. And now I do have like a business coach, and I just hired another sales strategy coach too, because none of my background is in any of the stuff related to that, right? So it's like I got to learn this just like you guys do from scratch. Yep. But I found one of the best investments I've made, and I'm not sponsored, although I wish I was, that would be cool. But Audible, I have an Audible subscription, and it's like $15 a month. And every month I have a goal to go through one business book, and I usually listen to them 1.5 or double speed, because I have 7 kids. You know, I don't have a lot of time to just kind of sit around and read books and things. I'm changing diapers and doing stuff like that, which is great. But so whenever I'm in the car, or I'm driving, or if I'm mowing the lawn, or going to, like, I'm trying to listen to an audiobook. So I do have a promo code. It's audibletrial.com/video creators. If you go there and you don't have an Audible account yet, you can get 1 book for free. And that's the way like I try to do it. And I've read some really good ones, and I love it because it's a really inexpensive way to get access to some of the best knowledge and information in the world. And like a really long, it's like a whole 6-hour audiobook, 10-hour audiobook, right? You can get for like $15. It's like sitting at the feet of the masters for like not a whole lot of money. So I'd recommend doing that kind of stuff.
That's how I found out about the Pumpkin Plan.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I got that audiobook early on in my Audible subscription. And when you say that it's tough to find the time to get through these things, you know, I was like, if I do 10 minutes a day, what is that in a month? You know, that's 5-6 hours, give or take, of really good listening at just 10 minutes a day. You know, I installed this little Bluetooth shower head in the shower.
Oh, cool.
It was on Amazon for like $15, right? And because I was thinking, where can I get 10 minutes a day with this that I otherwise don't have? So I popped that in, and well, I get 10 minutes a day of podcasts and audiobook as I'm taking a shower. I'm like, this is time that
That's awesome.
Completely reclaimed. But I get through books like the Pumpkin Plan and you know, lots of other business books, whether you do the newer stuff or the older classics like the How to Win Friends and Influence People kind of thing.
Yeah. E-Myth, guys, get that one too.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna need to put one in next to our toilet, next to our shower head, next to when I'm brushing my teeth.
It's amazing how much time you can reclaim just by putting a speaker in there.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. Yeah. Cool. So I know you talk about turning YouTube into or YouTube stress into a positive thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, and we'll dive into these questions here. How should we go about thinking about that?
Yeah, well, every time one of these problems comes up, you've got something to learn about. And I know that sounds kind of hackneyed, right? Like, ooh, this terrible thing that you're dealing with is really an opportunity to learn. Well, the truth is that it is, because we don't know most of the time when we get into something as general as media and then focus it to something like YouTube and then maybe the video creation side. The more you do any of these things, the more you realize what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you love doing, what you hate doing. Our episode on the Create Unknown with Jake Roper of Vsauce 3 goes into this because his background is insane. He went from project to project, from music to some TV stuff to whatever before he wound up doing Vsauce. And at each one of these steps in the process, he had a much better sense of who he was professionally and what he liked to do. So the next gig you do involves those things that much more strongly. And this is better for your happiness, and it's better for, you know, what you do on the career side. And so every time there's a problem, you know, you do one of these projects, you encounter new problems. Well, hopefully you learn how to solve it and you pick up that skill. But you also learn about what you should be doing and what you enjoy doing. So the problems in that way are really an excellent opportunity because we don't have any idea where something like YouTube is going to be in 5 years. When YouTube started, nobody really saw something like Twitch come. And Twitch changed how gamers deal with content. It completely changed that. We kind of think we know where YouTube is headed. Our last episode was about how two distinct YouTubes are developing. The YouTube Rewind debacle kind of showed that there are a few different things happening on YouTube right now. So in truth, we don't have any clue how any of this is going to go in 3 years even. So the more you learn, the more you're prepared to flow with whatever happens, to go to another platform 10 years from now, if that's the case, to expand into something like podcasts, as Kevin did. He's got this great, Vsauce 2 YouTube channel, and he wanted to move into something like podcasting. He was able to do that because he learned along the way. So, even when the issues are mental health things, which are very tough to deal with, you're learning about yourself, and you can advance your career by applying those lessons down the line.
Yeah, that's great. Let's dive into some of you guys' questions. So Haunted Road Media, thanks for being a member of the channel. Mike, he says, what's the breaking point for knowing when you need to bring in some help before you get overwhelmed or burned out?
I think it's when you really start to delay something you need to do. When there's something that needs to get done. It's one thing if you kind of put it off for a day or make like some excuse to not do it immediately. But when you keep kicking that can down the proverbial road, then there's a problem with you being able to do it. Like, even if you don't feel bad about it, going through those steps rather than just taking care of business on it, that shows like, okay, somebody else should be helping you with this part, because clearly on some level you're avoiding doing this.
Avoiding it or not having success with it,
Yeah, like, exactly.
That might be a good chance, a good opportunity, or just something like, what's your goal, and if is that a task that anyone else could do? And I'm like, if it's yes, then I'm like, I'm gonna have someone else do it. And some of you guys remember my story. That first hire I made, I took $3,000 out of my personal savings account, and I hired an editor, and I just said like, I got $3K for you. This is a friend of mine, needed a job, didn't know how to edit. So he went through the tutorials on lynda.com and learned how to edit. And I said, my goal is at the end of this 3 months, I need to make $9,000 with the time that you freed up for me. And this math works. Or otherwise I can't keep giving you $3K. So I made an investment, like my own business loan, so to speak, to myself. And I had a plan in place. I executed it, and I instead of making $3K back, I made $15,000 in just the first month alone. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that's when I learned how important it is to work on your business, not in your business.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
that's a great way to put it.
And so now the way I think about it, Mike, is even my email, like I get hundreds of emails a day. I can't possibly go through that. I have someone on my team named Grace who spends around 15, 20 hours a week just doing email. And I'm like, okay, how do I scale email? Because like, how does she know the relationships I have with people and prior conversations? And like, how do I even systematize this? And there's a way to systematize everything. Now I do about maybe 7 or 8 emails a day, and she does the rest. But it's like, okay, well, first step number 1, search my archive of my email and read any past conversations I may have had with this person to get an idea of, is this, person I need to respond to or not? And anyway, so I go through the whole system, but that's the way I think about it, Mike, is like, don't hit the breaking point. Just start thinking now, even if you're not in a place to execute. What types of things do I do now that someone else could easily do instead of me? And just start putting together checklists for them on how to do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a whole lot of removing some responsibility from your own plate. It doesn't take a whole lot before you start to see the benefits. And, I don't know, think about something in your day like doing the laundry or something like that. Like, how awesome would it be if you never had to do laundry again, if somebody else did it and they knew exactly where to put everything when it was done? When you look on paper, that's not the most significant thing in the world. But we all kind of know how awesome it would be never have to worry about this. Yeah. So even a little tiny thing really has an effect on the overall thing, whether it's your channel, your business, your life, whatever.
Yeah. Mike has a follow-up question. He's like, how do you find help? Those who want to voluntarily help don't have the skill required, even though they think that they do.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true, that a lot of people will offer help and services, and they mean well, and they may or may not have skills that will help you. You have to be able to say no to them, and you can be honest about why you're saying no. You can say, well, what I really need is X, and you're really good at Y, and Y is not X. So I need to find somebody who can really do X well, or this element of how you do X isn't what I need. You can be completely honest and give them, if you really want to work with them as a person, if you like them and want to have a relationship there, you can just flat out say, you need to be able to do this thing, you need to be better at this other thing, and then we can work together. That's useful feedback for them, and it's not rude at all to deny their services.
Yeah, just tell them where they can shove it and move on, right? No, I'm kidding. They'll do that.
Yeah, maybe not. No.
Yeah, like in my case, where am I going to go and find a great YouTube strategist who can reproduce the results that I can reproduce for my clients, right? Like nowhere. So the way I do is I look for someone who has the right heart, the right attitude, and is teachable, humble, team player, who has the right characteristics. And then I'm like, all right, I just got to teach this person. I got to train them from the ground up. And that comes back again to me, putting good systems in place that have a reproducible result at the end, that if someone goes through this training with me for X amount of time, then at the end, I feel confident about letting them start becoming a client interfacing strategist on my team. And that's not something that happens quicker overnight, but I now look for the right people and train them myself, as opposed to looking for someone who has all the right training. Not on everything, but on some stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, is that the people matter a lot more. If you want somebody who you can trust, you get along with, you can communicate well with, if that stuff is in place and they have the capacity to learn something, then they can develop, and that's good for them and it's good for you. But it's really tough to find that match, that working relationship where you just don't excuse me, you don't worry about the crazy stuff. You don't worry whether somebody's dependable, because if there's some little detail to work out with training, you can always do that. They can always learn to do a thing. But it's very tough to find people who match personality and just all of those things.
Yeah. Better Lou in the chat says, every day I think I could get so much done if I didn't have to do the mundane dishes, cleaning, and laundry every day, multiple times a day. Right? And I understand that too. And the way I think about it is like that is I'm actually doing this for those people in the first place. The people who fill the diapers, and the people who eat all the food in the fridge, and the people who run out by my door screaming while I'm trying to do a podcast episode, right? It's just like, that's who I do this for. And I feel like sometimes I'm not saying you do, who was it again? Lily or Better Lou. For me though, I got to remind myself like that, they are more important than the YouTube channel. Like if I got to pick between working on something that I'm passionate about, which is serving creators, versus my family, it's like family's got to win hands down every day. No contest, or I'm going to have a lot of other problems when these kids get older, right? And that's not the only reason why, but I think it's important to keep that in mind. Green Shorts DIY says, should the stresses of YouTube be part of the story of a YouTuber's channel, or is it just complaining? Should we isolate our viewers from it?
I think that totally depends on your channel. When we're talking about somebody like a Vsauce 2, that's a science, technology, math channel. I don't think anybody watching Kevin's YouTube channel would want to hear any of this. It's not like he does a daily vlog about his life. Now, it might be perfectly appropriate for him to open up a bit on social media. they might really love to see a glimpse of what he's struggling with and dealing with in that arena. Probably not on the channel for a guy like him. Again, if he had a different type of channel where, for example, this whole issue really kind of blew up when Shane Dawson made a video in early 2017 about YouTubers being depressed. Okay. Shane's style on YouTube is so open and about him and his life and all of that, that video was perfectly appropriate for him to put on his channel, and his community found a lot of value in it. And so did YouTube more broadly. And so other people started to talk about their stresses and depression and their stories. It totally depends on your channel. If you think that opening up like that is a bad fit for your actual videos, that's fine. There's probably a place where you can do it. And that might be Twitter, it might be Facebook, who knows? But if it's something that you really want to do and need to do, then find the appropriate avenue. If it fits in your videos, that's cool. People love to get to know creators. It's part of the experience and connection.
I'd say if it aligns with the value proposition of your channel, then yeah, use it. But but it can come off as, I've seen this happen many times, as creators just complaining. And that's to your point, Tom, that's what it sounds like sometimes, where you have this big creator who starts being open and honest about how they feel, and then everyone's like, oh, boo-hoo, you have 16 million subscribers and making $17 million a year, and you're complaining about, and this is a real issue to that person. And now that's like part of what actually makes this really isolating, is like a lot of creators don't feel like they can actually talk openly about this stuff with people, because they're like, yeah, like, what do I have to complain about? I've reached the pinnacle of what everyone else wants to do. I'm living the dream that other people wish they were living, but it's not really what I thought it was going to be. And it's actually on the backside isn't at all what it looks like on the front side. And there's just not really too many safe, open places they can talk about that without people making fun of them for having some sort of sob story. So, and I would, so talk about it if it makes sense for your channel, but also, the other mistake I've seen people make with this, Tom, is that they'll use that tactic as a reason for why they're starting Patreon, or for a reason of why they're doing this crowdfunding. Never like associate my life is so hard and with complaining with trying to generate sales. That is like the worst thing that you could do. Sales should always be about a value exchange, not about, please support me because YouTube doesn't pay me enough, and so you guys are my viewers and you need to pay me more, right? Yeah.
The people who do best on Patreon are the ones that say, I am interested in this funding so that I can do this specific thing. Whether it's when I hit this level, I can double my volume of videos per month, or I can upgrade my studio so the quality is going to shoot through the roof. Whatever it is, the people who appeal the best on Patreon are the ones who are saying, I would love your support, and here's exactly what I'm going to do with it. When you don't do that, it's sort of like, hey, I've opened up this page for you to pay me to be brilliant. Yeah, nobody really likes that, you know? Like, it just doesn't go over as well.
Otherwise, you'd be a millionaire by now. So it doesn't,
we all would be just constantly exchanging each other's money in this weird cycle of appreciation.
So let's hit this question, and I think we've kind of highlighted it a little bit here in the beginning, but video call-in show, what's the most common cause of YouTube burnout? Anything else you want to add to that you feel like creators should think or consider in terms of like avoiding getting to that burnout stage in the first place? Doesn't have to be. I know we covered a lot already.
Yeah, we hit on all the big stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say the thing we didn't hit on is really being honest with yourself. And so I saw somebody else talk about negative comments, critical comments, things like that. And this comes up all the time because with the Create Unknown and even with Vsauce 2, which is getting, lots more views than our podcast does, we read every single one of the comments. And there might be 10,000 comments on a video. I will read them all. Okay. With the Create Unknown, we respond to as many as possible because there's still a manageable number. So that's kind of awesome. But our mindset there is that the audience is an amazing thing when it comes to criticism. Okay. And they give feedback which can be very negative. and thank God we have it. Okay, if they see a problem, it's usually before we do. When we see patterns in comments with people complaining about different things, it opens our eyes to an issue existing which we may not see, we may not fully understand, or we get it, but we didn't realize it was as big a problem as it was. So we early on committed to being extremely honest with ourselves. And I know Kevin's done this his whole career with Vsauce too, where he just is honest with himself. And it's a huge reason he succeeded. He takes all that information and kind of processes it dispassionately, like, what can I do about this to make the channel better for the people watching it? Okay. And that's huge. That's just so important, to be able to go to a place in your own mind where you know you're being honest with yourself. And that underscores a whole lot of what we've talked about today, where if you really think, I just have to tell myself the truth and then believe myself when I uncover it, it makes a whole lot of decisions that follow after that much, much easier.
That's right. Yeah. If you guys feel like, hey, I'm at a point where I can scale and I could really do this, but I just need extra money, there's a training for those of you who are members of the channel called How to 150x Your Revenue on YouTube with a Business Plan. And I highly recommend that you go through that. If you're a member, if you're not, you can click the join button down below, or if you're listening to the podcast, there's a link in the show notes. But go through that, and that I think like that'll really start helping you think about this as a business and start thinking about this in terms of systems and start putting things in place that literally, it's like really simple math, 150x your revenue on YouTube. It's actually not that hard, but
it sounds nutty, but it's totally plausible. It absolutely is plausible.
I would have been more realistic and said how to 1000x your revenue on YouTube with a business plan, but no one, people would think it was clickbait at that point. So, but it's true.
It's not.
No, it's not clickbait. You absolutely can.
It really isn't. Yeah.
So, I mean, if I help you make $1,000 with your $5 investment, I'd say that's a pretty good trade. But, but that's down there for you guys who are interested in that. But you'll also find links down there to the Create Unknown's YouTube channel and podcasts. And you got one every other week. Is that right? Every 2 weeks?
Yeah, we're just wrapping up season 1. We've got some pretty good stuff ready to roll in season 2, and some pretty big changes in a very exciting way. And so we're gearing up to do that in March or so. In the meantime, Kevin and I are having some conversations about different things on YouTube. Like I mentioned earlier, talking about the split in the 2 different YouTubes. That was something we talked about for about half an hour last week, I think. Yeah. And there are a lot of big topics like that where we fold in what other creators are saying and come up with a perspective that's hopefully as fair as possible, because we hear a lot of really critical things on one side, really kind of defensive, apologetic things on another side. The truth is always somewhere in between those, right? And we want to pull that out and get a good understanding of the issue, especially drawing on the episodes that we did in season 1 with Smarter Every Day, iJustine, all 3 Vsauce guys talking, Kwebbelkop, iDubbbz has just an incredible perspective on some of the crazier parts of YouTube, since he's a little bit of a different creator in terms of outlandish comedy and absurdist things. He really pushes the boundaries, and hearing how somebody like that can process a sustainable YouTube channel. Well, that's very different from somebody who has a very successful sewing tutorials channel, right? So putting all of those together to talk about some of the big issues on YouTube and with creators, we're excited to keep having those conversations, and we're excited for the upcoming season 2.
Awesome. You guys check it out, youtube.com/thecreateunknown or thecreateunknown.com, and I'll be listening to you guys. So looking forward to hearing what you guys produce and come out with. I'm excited for it. So And if this is your guys' first time here, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, all the places you listen to your podcast episodes. You can join us live at youtube.com/video creators at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on most Mondays now. I'm going to be revisiting my live strategy in 2019, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but you can join us there, and we'd love to hang out with you and see you guys interacting in the chat and get to know you and answer your questions as well. So thank you, all of you guys, for being a part of it. Check out the Create Unknown, and we will catch up next week for another Video Creators Podcast live stream episode, whatever we're calling this. So thanks for hanging out, guys, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Tim.